Hello and welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast. Now, my next guest is an award-winning author, Sell More with Sales Coaching. You may have heard or read her articles in Selling Power, Salesforce.com, Entrepreneur Inc. and Forbes. Peri teaches and coaches sales VIP and their teams on how to leverage the neuroscience of buying to increase sales and improve the client experience. So welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Peri Shawn.
Great to be here.
Well, it's lovely to have you. You're in Toronto. So, I think today recording, I've gone almost all around the world. I've just missed out Asia. So you're my first Canadian today. So welcome.
I'm honored.
You're representing Peri.
Great. I love it.
So, we're all experiencing challenging times, and we were just off camera talking about, lockdown. How have you had to adapt your business? What has changed? Not just the fact that everyone's on virtual, but things that were perhaps unexpected, but also for your clients as well, things that they've had to change that are a little unexpected.
Yes. Well, and it depends on what stage of the game that you're talking about too, because I would say for my clients, when COVID first hit, it was because I have three parts to my business. I have executive coaching, I have the corporate training, and then I do some work for entrepreneurs. And the executive coaching and the corporate training, it just went through the roof. I mean, I from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, for the first, I would say, month, I was either working on strategy with executive or preparing for, what's ahead. Now things obviously have settled out now, and then training the team and preparing them on how do you actually sell virtually, when you're used to being able to meet face to face, and also how are you, with people's stress levels being higher, how do you communicate and be empathetic at the same time still building the relationship, in the communication. So that was interesting at the beginning. I would say, I know the word pivot's been used a lot, and I prefer to use the word responsive, meaning that, because responsive means there's a dynamic in which you're doing it in context of what's most helpful to the client. Pivot, sometimes people just, I've seen some people choose to, pivot thinking that this is what's going to work, and they hadn't checked in with the client or the clients that they serve to see if that actually works. So for my clients, being responsive has been a key factor. Interestingly enough, the choice of being responsive and how to be responsive has made a huge difference from them. Yesterday, I spoke with the final, because I like to check in and see how the results are going from the things that we've done together, and et cetera. And I had the final conversation for that. And those who've been responsive have been able to increase their sales this year.
Wow.
Versus seeing a drop. And that to me is huge. I know at my end, the three parts of my business, some of them have tripled. Simply because of being responsive. The first thing that I did with COVID, I have long-term relationships with my clients. Some of them I've been working with for over a decade, some of them too. It tells you how long I've been in business. Anyway, and for me, it was reaching out, finding out what's going on for them, what's how are they responding, how's the team doing, those kinds of things was my immediate response, because I want to know what's going on. And I found interesting with the executive coaching side that we actually have strategy has been a major component. So that's what I have a lot of focus with the senior execs that I'm working with about how are we going to strategize going forward, whether it be sales, managing the team right now. I know when what happens when in some parts of the world, depending on where you are, a lot of the team is still working from home or is only working from home. And how do you navigate, when do you look at, do they come back to the office? What does that look like? And what does that strategy, and the strategy including not just the logistics, but how do you manage the mental health, the response of the team to still demonstrate that you have the best interests of your team in mind and clients at the same time. And that's an interesting world to navigate as a senior leader.
Excellent, excellent. So what is your take on the neuroscience behind what you do? Because that's the angle that you take. And I would imagine that's quite more relevant now. So
oh yes, because of, depending on how stressed an individual is impacts their buying choices. In some cases we've seen, in the retail world with online shopping, some of it's gone a little low through the roof in terms of, and that's the emotional response dynamically. And that depends on where someone is operating from, whether they're operating from the more fight or flight portion in the amygdala, or if they're, using more of that executive decision making in the frontal lobe. I'll just give context in terms of the neuroscience. A lot of salespeople or organizations, when they're choosing their sales strategies, and therefore then the activities that the team engages in, they're choosing them based on quite often the more old guard, the more traditional kind of sales processes. I make a distinction between, traditional sales versus true sales, and true sales is when you're using the neuroscience. And the neuroscience, multiple studies indicate that people actually have a good portion of their buying decision already complete. And actually, the studies show that they actually make the decision unconsciously first, and then they become conscious of it. And so as the salesperson or sales team, the idea is during the conversation is to find out where they are in their buying decision, not assume that they're at zero. Cold calling, sure, they'll be at zero. But if you're, ideally you want to design your sales strategy so people are reaching out and you want them to be as far along in that buying decision as possible. And so knowing that they make the decision unconsciously, it's about learning how to meet people where they are already in their buying decision and what to say and ask in order to engage them so that they become more and more consciously aware of that decision that they've made. It's a different approach to a conversation. It's also a different approach to the sales activities that the team will engage in. Which activities, look at it from short-term and long-term, but you also look at it in terms of results, but you also look at it from the concept of how far along, if I engage in that activity, how far along will they be in their buying decision by the time we have that conversation? And so ideally, last night I was working with a group of entrepreneurs, and we were looking at their actual sales model that they've developed and why they were or weren't getting the results they were getting, because they were choosing activities where the people were coming with maybe 50% of their buying decision complete, whereas other entrepreneurs who were much more successful were coming, the people were coming to the conversation 75 to 100% of their buying decision complete, which means that they're just dealing with the logistics of working together. And so that's pivotal in terms of setting someone up for success with getting better results overall.
I mean, that's really interesting. I'd like to know if you can, in your questioning, to find out where they are in that unconscious decision-making process, because absolutely you can see that if they're at the end and you're giving them, I mean, it's so irritating for someone to tell you what you already know.
Right, exactly.
it just puts you off, you know, and salespeople are doing that all the time. So
Exactly.
there
Yeah.
is the consciously knowing where they are, but how do you ask the questions to find out where they are
Ah,
consciously?
great, a great question, and you're absolutely right, because one of the things that I do in the work that I do with organizations is I will listen to the sales team and what they're currently doing, because I'm looking at knowledge gaps, skill gaps. How do I fill, rather than just giving them all sorts of information? How do I fill that gap? And as I'm listening to them, I sometimes I'm going, oh gosh, do they realize what they're doing? Because the buying happens in the client's brain, okay? And the brain, the client has already made the decision to buy. They're actually stepping on it and actually convincing them in some ways not to buy by giving them all this added information they don't need. In most cases, people need very little, you know, we'll know this much about what we have to offer, the history of the company, you know, all the great products, et cetera, et cetera. But for someone to complete the decision, they generally don't need a lot of information. And so it's important to be able to drill that down. And to answer your question, the simplest way to find out what's most important, because everybody has, you know, to get to that point of being wherever they are on that buying decision, 50%, 75, or 100%, and anywhere in that spectrum. I call that the spectrum of buying. Um, they have already used some criteria by which to get there. And our job as the salesperson is to find out what that criteria is. And then, so let's say, I know they're at, you know, they've gone up until 75%. Now we need to help them from 75 to 100%. So that, but we need to know what they've already, you know, done
Fuck
so
off their
far
list.
that's
Yeah.
going on inside their brain. And the easiest way to do that is to simply ask a question that connects to how they found you. And again, you're hearing my bias. It's not cold calling. Cold calling is, they'll be at 0 point in their buying decision. If you're really lucky, they might be at 10, or you know, but very low. But if you have a sales process where they're reaching out, then they're going to be, when you actually have that conversation, great question to ask at the beginning is a question that connects to how they found you. So let's say somebody finds me on LinkedIn. A question I might ask is, oh, so what was it in my, you know, my LinkedIn profile? There's lots there. There's videos, there's articles, there's other, and that's my responsibility, is to make sure that that information is there so that it speaks to whatever criteria they might be using to make a decision. And then as I ask the question, so what was it about my profile that caused you to reach out? What are they going to do? They're going to say, oh, Peri, when I saw that video where you were talking about the neuroscience of asking questions, let's say, that's what I really want my team to learn how to do. All right, now I know what's important to them. And that gives me a starting point upon which to ask my questions. And that's the reason why I don't believe in scripts, because a script assumes that everybody is in the same place and is using the same criteria. And that's not necessarily the case. If someone comes by a referral, I might say, so what was it that, say it's Samir who gave the introduction, you know, what was it that Samir said to you that, you know, piqued your interest enough to, for us to have this conversation? Oh, he went on about, you know, the great results he got and da 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 da. Ah, okay, so tell me about the kind of results that you would like to get. And then
It's simple, but it's brilliant, isn't it? Because
it's very simple.
they're really narrowing in on what interests them, and then you can
Right.
delve deeper as to where they're at with that.
Yes.
You know, what they were thinking, and then kind of that's your starting off point. Yeah, I love that. That was brilliant. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh,
I
you're
might
welcome.
just use that, Peri.
Great.
Good. Yeah, lovely. The thing is, you can imagine someone just stamping all over it and not asking that question, and going off in a completely different direction. And that's how they kind of lose the sale constantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of giving, one of the things that I often do uh, with organizations is, I'll give you an example. Last year, In an industry that's super complicated, I mean, super complex, it would take me 10 years. I mean, most of the people who are on the sales team are former engineers, okay? And so this is an industry that there's no way I could know their product in coming in. And what I'll do is I will become one of them, and I will sell their product to them. And we give a mic to the salesperson and a mic to me, and we do this, and the team is around listening in. And in this dynamic, after we finished and we did the debrief, the team members were talking about what they noticed and what was their aha moment and that kind of thing. And it was really neat to hear them say, there was so much silence in the conversation. And I said, what do you think that's about? And they said, you're giving them space to think. And I said, yes, because it's all about a buying decision. It's not about me talking. And then another one said, and you only ask one question at a time. And I couldn't help myself, but I laughed like I just did now. And I said, yes, the brain can handle one question at a time. 2 questions, there's sort of a shortcut that goes on for someone. And the neat part is they were shocked that I could sell their product. And simply because I'm not going in as the person who's going to be doing the talking. And that's the mistake I see so many people when they're hiring salespeople, is they set up the interviews where the person is talking and then they think they're a good salesperson. Not a match. What was happening was I was asking the questions so that the client was making the neurological connections that this was a match for what they needed. And that to me is, how do you say it? That it's a fine art, but once you learn it, it really, I refer to it as sales presence. Being present to what's going on for the client and their decision-making that's happening in their brain. Because when you're present to that, you don't have to do a lot of talking. And I've also found that if you speak more than 4 sentences at a time, you shut the client down. And so, I've worked with large sales teams. I think the largest has been, at one time in a department, 700, and they track everything. And what we would do, because we take the neuroscience, learn, 4 neuroscience grad students I've been working with that we comb through the research, and then I test it inside these environments to see what works, what doesn't. Just because the neuroscience says it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. I want to see it in an actual conversation and action. And we found that if you get beyond 4 sentences, that you lose the person. And if you keep it to 4 sentences or less, you get better results. And lo and behold, it's a real test for some salespeople because their natural tendency is to talk. But the reality is, listen, ask the question. And it's fascinating to me.
As you say, it's because when you were talking, I was thinking, sometimes in the podcast I ask 2 questions, and I wish I could take the last one back, but I'm still kind of forming it and it goes on really. It's something you have to practice. You just have to practice.
Yes. And it's about getting better day by day. When I teach people how to do it, and I think the best thing to do is not to think you're going to be great at it right away. I like to set realistic expectations. Give yourself some time and recognize it's incremental improvement. And it's a great thing to have someone who can help you with doing some coaching alongside to help you focus in on that incremental improvement, rather than thinking that, learn something and you're going to be perfect at it right away. That's not the way things work.
Would be nice, but it's not.
It would be nice. I'm with you on that, but it's not the reality.
So, what one tried and tested strategy would you offer listeners to help them to scale their sales?
I would offer this, and it's a question back to them. What is your referral strategy? And I ask this a lot of people. Most people, well, I'm not going to say most. I haven't yet had anybody say that they actually have one. and in organizations or otherwise, until after we've done some work together. And why do I say that? Is because a couple of things. Referrals is something that will get you great results in the short term. You get a referral today, you're going to get business pretty soon. All right. But also when you have referrals and an actual referral strategy, then it has exponential growth to the business. One, our research is that I will ask audiences to choose anything and ask them where they are in their buying decision. And then I will ask, when you get a referral, and this is thousands of people. So when you're given a referral for a professional service, where are you in your buying decision? And 80% of the group or more, in each case that I do it, is at 100% of their buying decision complete. So that makes your sales conversations from going this long to much shorter. And also the research out there shows that a client who comes via referral is going to give referrals. Actually, they're going to give 2.89 referrals. So let's round it down to 2. So if every client you get that comes via referrals, you get 2 more referrals. And if you're business to business, the research shows that 84% of business to business buying decisions start with a referral. So there's just so much research out there that referrals is something that we want as part of every person's strategy going forward.
It's interesting. I was reading an article about, it wasn't strictly about referrals, but it was about Trustpilot and leading from kind of Amazon and us all giving our score, our trust score of a company is a referral, and
Yes.
how even in business, we tend to trust someone else's opinion we've never met before, and we'll look at the reviews. And we're more likely to do business with them and be satisfied based on that. And again, a shorter sales cycle. It's so critical to business as we go forward. And especially, I think it's critical to business as we go forward. There will be some element of e-commerce, online, virtual, even when we're not in a lockdown situation. More businesses, that's how they're going to win business online. So it's not going to be face-to-face, and it's a different type of relationship building. People will look you up, they'll look at your company, and what are they looking for? They're looking for other people's opinions. So a whole world of business has changed, and certainly down onto business to business.
Yes.
So I'd like to know, if you're on a desert island on your own, Peri, what would be the one thing you'd take with you?
It would be, other than, family, friends, I would take my computer. And why? Because one, it does allow for this to happen, but even on a desert island, we probably wouldn't have Wi-Fi, but it would still allow for the creation of things. So for me, I like to solve problems. And for me, I get an idea, like this morning, I wake up, I've got an idea, I start creating something in order to solve a problem. So it sort of is my, my documentation of ideas and such.
You're a relentless problem solver.
I love it. Yes.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Peri. How can listeners get hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of me is through LinkedIn. I'm active there, and I'll check those messages really quickly. And if someone's interested in sales, I have a Facebook group that's called Selling with Science and Soul.
Lovely. I'll put all the links in the show note, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful speaking with you.
It's been a pleasure, So thank you for being on Scale Your Sales podcast, Peri.
Thank you for having me.